Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Welcome everyone to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. My name is Jacob Uchenna, and I'm taking you on economics. Today we'll be taking a look at the indifference curve analysis. The topic is a sequel to the theory of consumer behavior, and it's a conclusion of the ordinalist view of consumer behavior. And if we recall, the last class we had on consumer behavior, we said that the ordinalist school, there are two schools of thought in the study of consumer behavior, which one of them talks about the cardinalist view and the other one is the ordinalist view. Now the cardinalist said utility could be measured, but the ordinalist says utility cannot be measured, but instead revealed through preference. Now, the ordinalist now came up with the things called what? Indifference curve, which is what we are studying. Now, the indifference curve is actually a graph, a relationship between two commodities, a combination of the quantities that will give us the same level of satisfaction. And the indifference curve just says that at those different quantities of, say, commodities X and commodities Y, goods X and goods Y, that the consumer is indifferent, which means he could actually take any combination of those two to actually give him the satisfaction needed. For instance, you want to make a cup of tea, and the two things that you actually prefer for your tea is coffee and milk. So, or beverage and milk. You could have varying quantities of cocoa combined with milk or coffee combined with milk, but still they give you the same cup of tea. So we are looking at the cup of tea as the desired satisfaction you want, but the two commodities are the two things that are competing for your resources. Now, let's take a look at this. If we have this, a schedule, this is commodities X and commodities Y. At the first point, I take 20 of X with 5 of Y. Second point, we have 18 of X with 7 of Y. Point C, I've got 15, and this is 10. Point D, 12, 12 and 13. Then the fifth one, we get 7 and 18. Now, looking at this thing, these are different points of combination that at this point of satisfaction, I combine 5 units of X and 20 units of X and 5 units of Y. 18 for the second point, I have this and this. Now, graphing this on a curve with X on the horizontal axis, commodities X, and here commodities Y, we could have something, we'll generate something. Now, here, for X being 20, let's take this 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. And, okay, let's do the same thing. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Now, over here, I have the first point of combination. I have 20 and 5. 20 here with 5 somewhere here. I have a point of intersection between the two of them. Okay? Then the next one, I have 18 and 7. 18 here, 7 in between. 18, 7. I have something there. 15, 10. 15 is here, and 10. What's that? Okay, 12 and 13. 12 and 13. Another one, the last one is 7 and 18. 7 here with 18 over there. Now we see a curve. When we join all of them, we have something that looks like this. Yeah. Okay. Now, this curve connecting the relationship between commodities X and Y, this is what we call the indifference curve. Now, in the next thing you will see, you have a few questions popping up your screen. Take a look at them, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, fine. And ready? Okay. Yes, you're welcome. At the earlier part, a few minutes ago, we said we defined the indifference curve, and we said it is a curve showing the combinations of two commodities X and Y that will yield the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Now, here we've been able to see different points of combination of X and Y, and we've used this relationship to graph a curve. This curve connecting the combinations of X and Y is the what? The indifference curve. Some authors call it the locus of different quantities of X and Y that will give you the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Now, we'll take some things, the significances of the indifference curve. The indifference curve, significance of features of the indifference curve. First of all, the indifference curve represents the consumer's level of satisfaction, meaning that a higher indifference curve will yield higher satisfaction to a consumer than a lower one. Then, the second one, these points we are mentioning, I guess you'll be putting it down later in writing form, Abi. Okay, so I don't need to be writing it down. Okay, so I continue from there, Abi. Secondly, the indifference curve is negatively sloped. Firstly, we said it represents a given level of satisfaction. A higher indifference curve shows higher satisfaction than a lower one. Secondly, it is negatively sloped. Number 3 is that when you measure the slope of the indifference curve, it gives us what we refer to as the marginal rate of substitution. The marginal rate of substitution is actually the rate at which 1 unit of a commodity is exchanged for a unit of another. The rate at which a unit of one commodity, say X, is given up so that you can get some units of Y, or some units of Y is given up for some units of X. And marginal rate of substitution, MRS, is equal to the change in units of Y by change in units of X. So when you do that, it gives you the rate at which how many units of X goes for 1 unit of Y, and how many units of Y goes for 1 unit of X. Now, fourthly, the indifference curve is convex to the origin, meaning that it always bends towards the origin. The fifth thing is that the indifference curve doesn't intersect the x or y axis, because it is assumed that at every point in time you have two things that are competing with each other on your scale of preference. Then, last but not least, is what we call an indifference map. An indifference map is just a group of indifference curves. That means like 2-3 indifference curves drawn on the same axis. For instance, I have this on this, I have another one, I have another one. This becomes IC1, indifference curve 1, indifference curve 2, indifference curves 3. This whole thing, the whole diagram is referred to as an indifference map. Now, eventually, from what we explained the first time, what we said, that a higher indifference curve represents a higher level of satisfaction to the consumer, which means that what IC3 has the highest satisfaction here, and IC2 has a lower level of satisfaction or utility than 3 and has a higher one than 1. The lowest of all is 1. Okay, that wraps it up on indifference curves. But when indifference curve shows the utility level or satisfaction level of the consumer, you have to, before you can demand for something, you have to actually consider your resources with what you want to get. One thing is wanting something and another is being able to get it. So, in order to be able to get what you know what you can actually afford, or the possible quantities of each of any of these X and Y that you can actually afford, you have to consider your disposable income. That is what you have to spend. Then, that leads us to another curve under indifference curve analysis we refer to as the budget line. The budget line. The budget line, while indifference curve shows us the level of satisfaction, budget line tells us the feasibility of those things. That is possibility of you being able to get either a given quantity or the other, or we call it the expenditure boundary or constraints of the consumer. So the budget line is a curve or a graph showing the possible quantities or combination of quantities of two commodities, say X and Y, which the consumer can actually get given his disposable income, which is the money he has to spend, and the unit prices or the market prices of each of the commodities under consideration. Now, these say the total income is I or Y, okay, capital Y, right? Y is income. Small y is commodity Y, and X is commodity X, quantities of X, and phi X is the price of X, then Py is equal to the price of Y. Now, the budget line has a function. It says that Y, which is your total disposable income, is equal to Px multiplied by X plus Py multiplied by Y. What it means is that if I have the prices of X and price of Y, the total expenditure on both X and Y should give you the total disposable income. Now, like I said before, the budget line tells us the quantities of the two commodities we can get, so as to, given the prices, which is the Px and Py, and your disposable income. Now, something is there. On the budget line also has a negative slope like the indifference curve, but in this case it cuts the x and the y axis. Now let's have a look at this for an illustration. A man has a disposable income of 10,000 and decides to spend it on drinks and on shoes. A price of shoe goes for 1,000 naira, while a bottle of drink goes for 500. The question is, what quantities of each of the products can he get at the maximum? And secondly, graph out the situation as a budget line. Okay, going with that, I have the man's disposable income is 10,000. 10,000. Price, okay, we let X be drinks and Y be shoes. Price of X is 500 per unit and price of Y is 1,000. Right. So which means the quantity of X I would get, that is X units, will be equal to the total Y divided by the price of X. The total income is 10,000 divided by the price of X is 500. That gives us 20 units, meaning that this man cannot afford more than 20 bottles of drink. For Y units, we have Y divided by PY. That gives us 10,000 divided by 1,000, giving us 10 units. So if he decides to spend totally on X, he cannot go beyond 20 units. He has to spend totally on to concentrate on the consumption of Y. He can't go beyond 10 units. Of course, that would bring up something. That means the budget line would look like this. This is what the budget line would look like. We don't need my account. Now this is commodity X and commodity Y. All right. Maximum of X, I can get 20 units when I decide to concentrate on X alone. And maximum I can get for Y is 10 units. So I could have something that looks like that. So this is what you refer to as your budget line. The budget line. Now, the budget line represents the consumer's expenditure boundary or constraint. When we say constraint, it means limitations. It tells us what extent to which he can go. That means within what we are seeing here, he can actually decide to get anything, any combination of X and Y within these two boundaries. And both of them will give his income. Right. Now, the budget line can shift. There can be a shift in the budget line. The budget line can shift from one position to another. Now, the budget line can shift when there is a change in price. Those are reasons for a shift in budget line. For instance, when the price of X increases from 500 to 1,000, while Y remains the same, that means at the new case, we'll be able to get only 10 of X as well. That means 10 is somewhere here. Okay, that means the budget line will shift from here to here. Reason is an increase in price. Of course, when there's a decrease in price, the same thing happens. There could be a parallel increase when there is an increase. Prices are constant, but the income increases. So that would lead to shifts in the budget line. In such cases, the budget line will look like this. Here, the initial one. When there's an increase in income, that one is change in price, but increase in income will result in a parallel shift of the budget line from one point to another. Here is Y and here is X. Okay? Now, that is about the budget line. The next thing we'll look at, still under this, you have the consumer's equilibrium. At the beginning part, at the initial stage, when we started our study on consumer behavior, we said that the consumer behavior theory states that the consumer will keep on substituting one unit of a commodity for another until the point where he gains maximum satisfaction for every unit he spends. Now, the point where he gains maximum satisfaction is the point where he's able to coincide his level of satisfaction with the level of income he wants and the quantity he's getting. That is the point we refer to as the consumer's equilibrium. Now, the consumer's equilibrium is also referred to as the utility maximization point. It refers to it is defined or referred to as the point or stage where the consumer derives the highest possible satisfaction for every unit of income he spends on a unit of product or commodity. At that point, his level of satisfaction coincides with the price of the product. The additional satisfaction he gets from the extra units he demands for or is trying to afford to get is equal to the price. That means he actually makes sees that both of them are at par. That means they are equal. Now, but some other cases, because we have studied consumer utility theory from two approaches, we are also going to define or analyze the consumer's equilibrium from two approaches. So now, the first one The basic definition I just gave you, I'll go over that again, that the consumer equilibrium is the point where the consumer derives the highest possible satisfaction for every unit of income he spends. That is the basic definition. But the cardinalists define consumer equilibrium as the point where the additional utility or the marginal utility of the product is equal to its price. That is when a single product is being considered. That is where MU is equal to P. But for two or more products, the cardinalists say that the consumer is at equilibrium for two or more two products X and Y, where the ratio of the marginal utilities or the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the price ratios of the two products. That is to say that for commodities X and Y, this is for a single product. For products X and Y, say, equilibrium is attained where you have marginal utility of X over marginal utility of Y equals price of X over price of Y. Or you can actually rewrite this. This could be the same thing as marginal utility of X over price of X is equal to the marginal utility of Y by the price of Y. Either of this could go according to the cardinalist theory. And now, by the time you decide to go towards the ordinalist theory, the ordinalist theory says that the consumer is at equilibrium at the point where the slope of the budget line is equal to the slope of the indifference curve. That means they combine the two of them, where they are tangential to each other. Then you call that the point of equilibrium. Now, at that point, the slope of the budget line, we said the slope of the indifference curve represents marginal rate of substitution. The slope of the budget line tells us the price ratios. Now, meaning that by definition, from their definition, if this is an indifference curve, take that, and this is the budget line. What happens? Here is the indifference curve. Here is the budget line. This point where this just touches this is the consumer equilibrium point. And that means, considering his income, which is represented by the budget line, and his level of satisfaction, he can actually afford X, this, or A units of X. This is commodity X, A units of X and B units of Y, for him to maximize his satisfaction. Now, over here, if I have a map like this, quick one, and I have this, okay. A quick question for you. This is IC1, IC2, and IC3, and I have point K, L, M. Which of the points represents the consumer's equilibrium point? That's for you viewers to answer that. So that is about the consumer's equilibrium and the budget line. Now, moving onward from here, there could be cases that would lead to changes in the consumption bundles Now, I might have mentioned that before, but consumption bundles talks about the quantities of that, the combination of the quantities that gives the consumer the highest possible satisfaction. That means the combination of the two commodities at the point of equilibrium of the consumer. That's the consumption bundles. Now, with that, there could be changes. Things could happen that would lead to a change. Remember the other time we said the budget line could shift. When the budget line shifts and you decide to either leave your satisfaction at the same level, then definitely it's going to affect the consumption bundles. It can be the same. Or the prices change or the income changes, definitely the budget line will shift. So that leads us to things we call what? The substitution effect. And the income effect. Before we talk about the substitution effect, we'll take a brief, we would look at the income effect first. The income effect, there are two things we are looking at. We are not looking at just the money or nominal or money income. Or disposable income. We are looking at real income. Someone would ask, what's the difference? The difference is that the nominal or money income is just the amount you have to spend, face value. But the real income is the worth of your disposable income becomes your real income. So the worth of your nominal income becomes your real income. So the real income is actually determined by the price of goods and services. So, in other words, when I have something like this, let's make a rough one. I have something here. This is a budget line. This is a budget line, BL. And this is where this is the equilibrium point. That means this person is maybe consuming, this is X and here is Y. He's consuming A units of X and B units of Y, okay? Now, let's assume that prices for X reduce. When prices of X reduce, then that means more of X would be, the budget line would shift outwards. That means we have a new budget line this way. Now, normally, we are supposed to have a new level of satisfaction, IC2. Now, this increase maybe E and F. This increase from A to E and from B to F, the new levels is what we refer to as the income effect. Now, by definition, the income effect is the change in the level of consumption bundles of a consumer owing to a change in the real income. The real income is the worth of the money income. That is the quantities you can actually get or buy for the two products. So now, movement from A to E would represent our income effect in terms of X and as well as in terms of Y. So we have that. But in some cases, the consumer might decide not to go for a higher level of utility. Where the consumer decides to stay at the same level of utility, then that's another case. That means for the level of income for the change in price he actually experiences, he doesn't increase his satisfaction so that he can make some savings, but he can actually substitute one product for another. That is why the word substitution comes in. So the substitution effect is the effect on the consumption bundles created by the substitution of one commodity for another, which changes the equilibrium point of a consumer due to changes in price. Definitely all those things either changes price or changes, but definitely everything changes in income, real income, whether it is changing price or changing nominal income. It all leads to change in real income. Now let's look at this. Yes, taking a look at this. This is a situation where to illustrate the substitution effect. The substitution effect is actually giving up some units to get some more, and how it affects the consumption bundles you have on the consumer. Now, let's explain this. This is budget line 1 and 2. At the initial stage, there's a budget line 1. Then the price of X reduced, so the consumer was able to, his expenditure boundary moved from budget line 1 to budget line 2. That made him to have an income effect of, that is the normal effect or the income effect that it should have, is moving from quantities, bundles of A to a consumption bundle of B. But he decides to maintain the same level of satisfaction, which means he's not going to IC2, he decides to remain on indifference curve 1. For here, he is no longer going to be at point A, as we can see here. He has to make something that is parallel to this. This dotted line that is parallel to the second budget line, we refer to it as the compensated budget line. The compensated budget line will now tell us where the consumer would be if he decides to, the consumption bundle, if he decides to remain on the same level of satisfaction. Now, what it means is that he will be at this point C here, which is represented by C down here, small letter C. Okay. Now, at the point where he was before at A, he was demanding he would be able to afford B units, but at the new C, commodity Y has reduced to probably D. Okay, D units. Now, what it means is that instead of going to B, which is the direct effect or the income effect of a change in price of X, he decided to give up some units of Y so that he can get from A to C units of X. And that's what we refer to as the substitution effect. So from A to B is the income effect of change in price, while the change from A to C is the substitution effect. Now, that is about that on the consumer's equilibrium, the income and substitution effects. The last on consumer behavior, you have the consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is simple. It is just the extra you can get, the gain you can get whenever your budget is greater than the planned expenditure. Now, where you have the budget line, or you made a budget based on a particular price and you get to the market, let's say you budgeted to spend to buy something at some items at unit price of let's say 100 naira per unit, and you get to the market and you get to see that something has pushed the price down to 60. That means eventually, even though you get the same thing, you would get the same thing but at lesser value. And the lesser value means that you spend lesser of your income than you have some more. So the difference between the budgeted value and the lesser value of a given quantity or units of purchase is what you refer to as a consumer surplus. With that, we have come to the end of this study session. And like it is, a few questions will also be showing on your screen, and you get through to attempt them, and after which, if there's a problem, you can take a look at the video again. I'll see you next time. For now.